So we'll kick off then. Good morning, everybody. My name is James Finglas, and on behalf of the team here at MJ Flood Technology, I'd like to welcome you this morning to our team's webinar. So this morning the agenda is as follows. We'll have an overview of teams from our head of digital transformation, Gareth Wallace. We'll follow on then with our head of commercial practice, Jonathan Finglas, to give us, Teams features and what's new in Teams. He'll also be covering a section on licensing, because what a lot of organizations don't actually realize is they may actually well be licensed under their current licensing posture. He'll also be cautioning that there are increases in licensing coming down the track in March, and we'd encourage you to speak to us. There are solutions there to be able to lock 2021 pricing for your licensing posture, and how Teams may already be within your organization. We'll then move on to a tour of direct routing, versus using Microsoft for calling plans. That's Steve Bush, our chief architect here at MJ Flood Technology. And then we'll round off with Jared Hewitt, who will give us an overview of rooms and devices. Jared's an expert within the field of rooms and boardrooms, all types of environments, and how they dovetail into the solution. Probably important to note that there's been a lot of simplification around that, and a huge amount of choice now has been brought to the solutions, and really, it's an exciting place. So we'd encourage you use the Q&A throughout the morning, and be delighted to engage with you. Obviously, if there's specifics, please reach out later on. We'll talk to you throughout the morning, and hopefully it'll be an eventful session. What do we know so far? We know that Teams is the most prolific application on the planet today. Absolutely explosive. A key question that we get is it enterprise ready? The answer to that is it absolutely is, and Gareth Wallace will touch on that during his presentation. In terms of the organization here, you're talking to the most experienced team in terms of implementation of Teams voice in this country, with demonstrable experience, and we can bring a lot of value to that if you're considering this on your digitization journey. So look, in the interest of time, I'm conscious that we've got a lot of content to cover, and really interesting content. I will just touch on, I'll excuse myself for my unkempt look this morning, but I'm actually doing Movember in conjunction with the team over at Microsoft in aid of Suicide or Survive. So a worthy cause. So you will excuse me for that this morning. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Gareth Wallace. Gareth, you're welcome this morning to the call, and we'll hand over to you for your introduction to Teams.
Thanks very much, James. Good morning, everyone. So as James mentioned, my role in MJ Flood Technology is as head of digital transformation, and one of the things that I do as part of that role is talk to our customers about new and emerging technologies and adoption of those technologies and the impact of technologies within organizations. And certainly in the context of the last couple of years, the delivery of voice services to an organization has been one of the conversations that has been most common. So in terms of what that conversation looks like, I talk about what Teams voice is, and the question that comes up very quickly is as to whether it can replace traditional PBX. So can I just check if, with a nod from one of my colleagues, that my content is sharing there? Yep, great, thank you. So what is Teams voice? Well, Teams voice is Microsoft's implementation of cloud phone system, and it's the delivery of a cloud-hosted IP-based telephony service. It's delivered through the Microsoft Teams infrastructure via the soft client for on a PC-based user, or through a dedicated cut down client on a hardware device, telephone handset specifically. So that's one thing to call out. Not everyone has to operate Teams Voice using the Teams client on Windows. They can operate in exactly the same way as they used to with a handset device. The question is, can it replace a traditional PBX? Well, it's a very short answer to that. Yes, 100% it can. And so that, just touching on those two pieces is where I'd like to move on to. So is Microsoft Teams Voice, also known as Microsoft Phone System, is it enterprise ready? Well, yes, it is. The market agrees that it is. On the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see Gartner report for Unified Communications as a Service. And looking up in the leaders quadrant, you see Microsoft right up at the very top, and some very well-known names trailing behind. Teams Voice has been in existence for over 10 years. Our Microsoft Phone System has been in existence for over 10 years. If you go back to the days of OCS, Link, Skype, and now up into Teams, it's a very mature platform and service. It's based on Microsoft's global network, which is illustrated on the right here, which is one of the largest networks in the world. There's some statistics in there just in terms of the performance of that network, and absolutely critical in terms of IP-based telephony to have very high quality networking in place, and Microsoft is in the position to deliver that globally where perhaps others aren't. So it is 100% enterprise ready. There were in previous iterations some criticisms in relation to the quality of voice over from Microsoft. Not necessarily an issue with Microsoft, but that was generally networking capabilities. But networking from Microsoft, from carriers, etc., has improved such that latency is very low, and IP is a perfectly acceptable medium for the delivery of real-time comms. So any criticism that you might have heard in the past, I would say put those aside and look again, and to have, and you'll see the ability of IP-based telephony to deliver to organizations, and Microsoft's implementation of that. So in terms of how you use Teams as your phone system, so just some very quick points. So it's an evergreen platform. So legacy PBXs were often implemented and sat there pretty statically for 10 to 12 years with no new features, left sitting in the corner, difficult to manage, and very static in terms of its implementation. Teams Voice is cloud-based. It's constantly been updated. The level of development that Microsoft put into Teams and Teams Voice is hugely significant, and the functionality increases all the time. That functionality is there for adoption immediately. It's released by any organization without any change in infrastructure, change in licensing, etc. So it's a very dynamic platform in that regard. Dynamic yet stable in terms of its implementation. Point to note is that if you are already an Office 365 or M365 customer, you're halfway there. You have most of the licensing that you require. You may in fact have all of the licensing. My phone system is licensed as a Microsoft Phone System add-on to an enterprise subscription, but it's included in some of the enterprise bundles. So within an E5 bundle, Teams Voice is already there. So if you're using E5, you already have it. If you're on an E3 bundle or a business premium subscription, it's just a simple add-on to that. No significant change. It provides all the functionality to meet all general phone system user needs. So that's the basic question. Does it do what you expect PBX to do? Yes, 100%. And also, if you have an existing investment in connectivity to your preferred carrier or existing contracts for connectivity to the carrier, that those carriers can be integrated directly into your Teams environment, and you can continue to leverage those contracts. You can see out those contracts or continue to renew them. So and this is in terms of the call charges as to how you do that, whether you use Microsoft calling plans for call charges or whether you use what's called direct routing, which is where you bring your own carrier in. And if you have a carrier already, preferred carrier, you can use that carrier within Teams. So what are the core features of any PBX? And that's basically what Microsoft Teams Voice delivers: call queues, hunt groups, and whichever term you use, auto attendance, interactive voice services, call park, transfer, pickup, delegate, call divert, and voicemail, music on hold. All the standard user functionalities from the administrative perspective. It's administered within the Office 365 administrative console, and the capability to deliver to administer voice services is greatly enhanced through its integration within Office 365. Voice was traditionally delivered as a separate entity, very little overlap in terms of knowledge and administrative skills between IT and where often with part of the facilities group that voice is being delivered in. Now it's fully integrated within IT, and the ability for IT to understand voice is greatly enhanced. As I mentioned just in the previous slide in relation to direct routing, your ability to bring a carrier into your Teams environment and leverage preferential call charges, etc., is there within Teams Voice. And then there's significant call reporting and analysis that's available within the Teams platform. I know I'm moving quite quickly, but I am conscious of the time, so I just want to get through a little. We'll be more than happy to take questions at any point. So the next question is it for me? That's the question that asks. Well, what's the reality? Well, it fits all standard calling requirements. So it does everything that a standard PBX should do. So unless you have an exceptional requirement, the answer to that is yes, it is a fit. Okay, so that applies to just about every organization. Full contact center or CRM integration may require third-party software. Now, this slide was developed a couple of weeks ago, just before Microsoft Ignite. During Microsoft Ignite, Microsoft announced integration with the Teams integrated Dynamics 365 based contact center. So Microsoft are now bringing in contact center technology within the Teams fold. And so if you have an existing investment in Dynamics and you want to leverage that within the contact center, you've perhaps previously been paying for third-party integration to bring Dynamics into your contact center. Now Microsoft are going to do it directly from within the Teams service. It really fits if you have a dispersed or international workforce, very relevant in the last couple of years. It gives you a consistent telephony experience for everyone, regardless of where they are, whatever country they're in, whether they're in an office, whether they're at home, whether they're in a shared workspace, whether they're on the road. It's a consistent experience. So that's a key offering and a key benefit in terms of that, of being able to deliver that experience globally in a very consistent manner to everyone. Call recording, quality management systems also require some third-party software very often within compliance environments in particular. So there's native call recording capabilities within Microsoft Teams based on Office 365, but within some compliance environments there can be a requirement for advanced call recording capabilities in terms of search, etc., and retention of call recordings for compliance purposes, etc. So there are sometimes a third-party requirement there as well. I'm calling out, these may sound like negatives, they're not. I'm just calling out facts, that there are some areas for what that Teams Voice doesn't do. One point that it doesn't fit is if your wide area connectivity is poor. That's not a Microsoft issue, that's a real-time communications issue. If you need to have good network connectivity, but most networks are very good quality. Over the last 5-6 years, the quality has vastly improved, the bandwidth has improved, the latency has diminished to make real-time comms over IP perfectly viable in all circumstances. So again, coming back to third-party integrations and what you might use and where you require them. So high-volume call takers, an operator receptionist might require a different interface than the standard Teams interface, so that they can see calls queuing, they can put a call on hold and revert to it. So there's third-party applications, Teams certified. So Microsoft do a certification process for these third-party integrations. There's third-party operator console services and contact center services. Contact centers have gone omni-channel, so there's a lot of social, there's a lot of other mediums of communications, and so some third parties are really bringing those capabilities into the Teams environment as well. I've touched on quality management compliance service from call recording. Purposes, again, there is native capability there that will suit many organizations, but for some compliance environments you might look for third-party integrations, again Teams certified. Reporting, traditional PBX is just around about cost reporting, so you can still do all the cost management that you would do within a PBX environment, but you are now into a multimedia unified communications environment. So there's additional reporting and analytics that looks at the performance communications between yourselves internally and externally, call quality dashboards, etc. Been able to identify when latency is an issue for certain locations or certain people working from home, for example, where devices aren't substandard, and that's affecting call quality, etc. So there's a lot of call quality information there, and those are all enhanced again by some third-party applications. And then there's devices, meeting rooms, and management of those devices is a key part. So devices will come down to somebody using the soft client may just require a headset. Somebody who prefers to use a traditional handset, then there's handset devices. And then where something that we're all doing an awful lot of right now is meetings, one-to-one and multi-party meetings, from home, within offices, within meeting room environments, structured and unstructured. So all of those are available. So finally, my last slide is just in terms of getting ready for Teams Voice. So what should you do? Network readiness assessment, just make sure your network is good. Profile your users into personas, understand what your telephony needs and use are. Does everyone need a phone system, for example, is a question that's been asked these days. Do a cost analysis. Teams Voice will easily demonstrate the cost efficiency and effectiveness of Teams Voice. Explore direct routing for keeping call charges down and effective. Work with a good partner. I'll say no more, that's us. But it is a good partner. It's very difficult to make a bad product look good. It's very easy to make a good product look bad. We'll make a good product look good. Okay, so that's our call to action there, and then provide training and enablement for users. It is a change from users' normal work practice to using Teams and how you interact. So that would be a final call to action. So that's me, James.
Excellent.
I'm going to hand back to you there now.
Yeah, Gareth, thanks very much. And I know you were trying to fly through a huge amount there in tight time, and we're telling you to wrap up just to keep on point. So look, I'll move along very swiftly, and I'll introduce Jonathan Finglas this morning to the call, and he's going to cover, as we stated, the features and look at licensing posture and a couple of things around that area. Jonathan, you're welcome to the call this morning. I'll hand over to yourself.
Thanks, James, and good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for your time. Jonathan Finglas, I'm the commercial practice lead for the Microsoft practice here in MJ Flood Technology. I'm going to run through a couple of the features that Gareth spoke about initially and actually show you what they may look like visually, and then move on to what's new and what's coming down the roadmap. So essentially what we're looking at here is we're looking at the Microsoft dialing pad within Microsoft Teams. Just bear with me 2 seconds, my slides are just slow to change. So this is what it looks like from the soft client and the application. Essentially what we're looking at is bringing unified communications into the Microsoft Teams application for use on a daily basis. So, what does it look like? We've seen there that Gareth mentioned that you still have the hard phone, but this is bringing it into the soft phone option within Microsoft Teams, connected to the PSTN network. And we're able to easily dial out using that network to external parties. Simple things like call transfer and how they look like in a Teams environment. There's obviously two main types. We've got obviously a blind transfer where the call is coming in, we're choosing the user and we're sending it out to it, represented visually on the slide. And then we've also got the ability to do consultative transfer, i.e. finding out if the person that is required for the call is available to take the call, is in a position to speak to that person, and then being able to effectively transfer that call very seamlessly, all within the one application. Transferring a call from a consultative point of view allows them to actually, make sure the productivity, making the experience for the person dialing in a lot better. As Gareth mentioned there around auto attendos and call queues, what we're finding more recently and around that question around being enterprise ready is what does Teams have over and above its competitors, and not what is it lacking in. So essentially, from an attendant, auto attendant point of view, it really is supporting most functionality you've got now, and you've got more. So the likes of what's coming down the line and what's available in some tenancies now is dial by name directory search. So essentially being able to dial not by the DDI, by actually using voice recognition. Available in English at the moment, but obviously with Microsoft's roadmap plan to be scaled out across that as well. Obviously, customs, greetings, and menus are all have the ability to be customized, all using the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. So this is really empowering your IT team to make changes on the fly and customize your telephony environment to suit your exact requirements. From a call queues support point of view, obviously we've got the music while on hold, the ability to upload your own music, and the ability to actually create the custom greetings and setting different parameters in terms of call queues as well. So an example of that being, there's 3 people in sales, the 3 people are on the call, a 4th call comes in, where do we route that call to? We can put parameters around it. That goes back to an operator, giving the person dialing your organization a better experience and not just sitting there waiting on the phone, all optimizing that as well. So again, from a shared voicemail point of view, voicemail is no longer an addition, a license, and no longer an additional cost, and what's traditionally been complex to add. Shared voicemail for users in an organization, it just comes as part of Microsoft Teams, and it comes obviously with transcription as well into email. Calling management, Microsoft are making huge strides in this, and it's really targeting the IT users and the administrators within organizations to be able to administer Microsoft Teams a hell of a lot easier than what they have been able to do with the traditional PBX. So reducing complexity by having all of your phone numbers within one GUI available within Office 365 tenancy, and being able to let them get ready, and started within minutes, to manage call queues, to manage and scale the new numbers as they grow, as they add in, and being able to manage the auto tenants as well. Call analytics is a huge piece that Microsoft are working on, and essentially being able to prove return on investment. A simple example, especially with the remote workforce that we've had over the last period of time, and will continue to have in the way we work from a hybrid point of view. People are dispersed, and essentially what the call analytics allows an end user to dial in to their IT department, let them know that they've had a bad experience on one particular call, and allow that IT user to be able to drill down into that call and make suggestions to the end user as to maybe why that call was bad. Were they far away from their modem at home? Were they using a wired or wireless connection? And we can go down into that much detail to be able to better the experience for obviously your own users, but obviously the people who are there talking to while representing your own organization as well. All of that is feeding into a call quality dashboard that's becoming available within the admin console as well. So part of the Teams admin, it's all about simplification of the management, and it allows your network engineers optimize the network for calling. It actually comes with pre-built reporting out of the box with the solution, but then you've also got the ability to customize Power BI templates and can analyze and report the call quality dashboard data in order to report back into decision makers and analysts within the business to show that this solution is working. In this example on the screen, 0.78% of conferences being poor is a very acceptable level of poor quality. It will not be affected by the users. That gives you the ability to present that back into management to show the use and the performance of the solution, and essentially what the return on investment will be from that. Captions recording and transcriptions in Teams phone is coming. Essentially what we've got to be able to do now is be able to record Teams meetings. We're quite all used to that, and it's used effectively. Now what we're able to do is actually extend that out to the PSTN as well. So obviously the first language that's been released in is English. On top of the recording, you've then got the ability to have a transcription available for anything you might have missed in the meeting. Hugely useful in terms of if you were on the call and you want to revert back and you don't want to try and find where it is within the recording, you can use the transcription to find out what your colleague said at that particular moment in time as well. So really extending out the services that Microsoft are building in, and it's constantly evolving. This is a really, really good one, especially with the hybrid means of work. So at the moment, we've got the ability to use Microsoft Teams from your phone and from your laptop or desktop at the moment. What this feature is allowing us to do is we've got the ability at the moment to move between devices, from an application point of view. What this new feature is actually allowing us to do is breaking out and evolving Teams voice even further, that if on a PSTN call through Microsoft Teams and you need to move on the fly, you can actually transfer now to your phone across the PSTN. The people who you're on the call with or on the phone to have no knowledge that you've changed the voice, and it's really good in terms of being able to hand off kind of support calls for types of calls, one-to-one calls, group calls, but also actually quickly adding your kind of mobility to that call as well. The new phone experience, and this is really good in terms of what's being presented to your end users. Obviously, we've still got the ability, as Garrett said, to have the hard phone on the desk, but what we're looking at here now is bringing in unified communications into one application. So as you can see on the screen here, I've got my dial pad. I'm able to use a touchscreen device or the mouse to actually dial out. Something really handy is having your work number there. I don't know how many times me myself I've gone to the bottom of my email signature to give someone my DDI. It's readily available there within the new phone experiences. Calling history with the filters allows you to quickly call recent dials. And then you can also use kind of speed dial and have favorites built in with imaging. So really just improving that collaboration experience for users, as they work and traverse through their day. This is a full list, exhaustive list again that Gareth kind of mentioned as well, but it's all around kind of unifying the legacy PBX systems into 365, simplifying it. And as we're delivering these webinars, we're constantly have to keep abreast of the up and the coming features within Microsoft Teams. It's hugely changing, it's fastly changing, but all for the better as well. So if there's anything that you think that your phone system traditionally might do that you don't know if Teams does, reach out to us and we can absolutely address that as well. We'll move on and understanding the Microsoft Teams calling licensing. And essentially what we do is we break it down into kind of two subsets of users. Are you 300 users or less, or are you 300 users or more? So small to mid-size and enterprise as well. On the left, you see the traditional Microsoft licensing, that people would have as the core based on their user count and based on their requirements for Office 365 or Microsoft 365. Essentially, what we're looking at here is, adding voice as a capability. So within the SME space, the sub 300 telephone users, what we're looking at is the hero SKU is Microsoft Business Voice. This is a new SKU that encompasses phone system as well as audio conferencing. And this effectively gives you your PBX in the cloud. When you're above the 300 users, what you're looking at here is being on Office 365 E1, E3, or M365 E3. What options have you got? And it is a phone system add-on to deliver telephony if you're answering that specific question. Microsoft 365 E5 is obviously the essential, the holy grail of Microsoft licensing, delivering across all of the elements of that, including security and compliance. If you're not at the stage where you're ready to take on the security and compliance and the benefits of that within Microsoft 365 E5, phone system is there to be added on to. Additionally, on top of that, and Steve next will refer more to this, is how do we then connect to the PSTN network? And that is either through direct routing or else it's through Microsoft calling plans. Before I hand over to Steve to discuss that piece, obviously, as James mentioned earlier in the presentation, Microsoft licensing is always changing, is ever dynamic, and pricing increase are coming in March of 2022. My job as the commercial lead for MJ Flood Technology is to position licensing and analyze licensing posture to be able to deliver a return on investment, and that's something that I welcome with anyone on the call today. James, I'll pass back over to you.
That's perfect, Jonathan, and thanks for that. And I think it's probably fair to say that the licensing piece is a very complex area. You've tried to cover it there. I'm even a little bit lost myself, so we'd encourage anybody to sit down with you and take a look, at that, and are they getting the best bang for? Are they getting the best bang for buck? So thanks for that, Jonathan. So look, again, in the interest of time, I'd like to welcome this morning Steve Bush, our Chief Architect for Teams and Teams Voice, to the call, and he's going to take us on a tour of direct routing. So Steve, you're welcome to the call this morning. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, James, and good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Bush, Teams Architect at MJ Flood Technology. So the idea of this talk is over the next 15 minutes, we look at options for how to bring telephony to a Teams tenant. First, I'll clarify what we mean by calling versus telephony. Then we'll talk a little about calling plans, direct routing, and onto the approach to take when you're looking to roll out direct routing in your organization. So with Teams, you can be making a call from a PC or a user logged in from a mobile device or from a meeting room, assuming it's a Teams compatible device. And the person on the other end of that call can again be someone on a PC, someone on a mobile device, or someone in another meeting room. The point is they're using a Teams client, and those things are what we mean when we say calling. But when we talk about telephony, that's when we're doing a call that ends outside of Teams. It stops being a PC to PC or a network-based call, and at some point it breaks out onto the external telephone network, what we know as the PSTN. Also in Teams, we have the ability for people to dial a phone number from outside of the Teams ecosystem and join a Teams meeting that is in progress. So those are the elements we mean by telephony. It's where we're dealing with something that is outside of Teams. Focusing on telephony, there's two things to consider. Firstly, meetings, that scenario where you dial out from a meeting that is ongoing, or you dial into a meeting that someone has scheduled. Secondly, telephony, where you have users making or receiving normal phone calls. I'm not going to talk too much about the meeting side of things this morning, as the choices here are fairly limited. Basically, it's either turned on or it's not. The Teams meeting organizer requires an audio conferencing license. They schedule a Teams meeting, and the dial-in information block is added to the bottom of that meeting invite. With telephony, there are two key choices for how you bring PSTN to Teams, and that's via calling plans or direct routing. Calling plans are a first-party offering from Microsoft. Microsoft become your telco and provide you with PSTN. Direct routing enables you to bring your own SIP trunk to the Microsoft 365 environment through the deployment of SBC, session border controllers, be that hosted by you yourself as the customer or provided by a service provider. So why use calling plans? The main reason is simply convenience. You're already paying Microsoft for your Microsoft 365 subscriptions that give you Teams. Calling plans is another add-on that gives your users bundled minutes. So there's three key things to consider with calling plans. Number one, countries. Calling plans are available in 30+ countries, including Ireland, the UK, and the US. If you have users in these locations, you can assign numbers from any of those countries to your users. Secondly, licensing. Whether it's calling plans or direct routing, users need to have that phone system add-on that opens up Microsoft's Enterprise Cloud PBX to the users. Calling plans themselves are then the add-on license, and you choose between a domestic calling plan or a domestic plus international calling plan. When you assign a calling plan to a user, they get a bundle of minutes and can dial domestic or domestic plus international based on the calling plan that you assign to them. Bundled minutes vary across regions and plans, and the minutes pool across the organization by both size and geography. And finally, with calling plans, a consideration is interop and telephone numbers. So Microsoft will give you telephone numbers, that will give you new numbers, or you can choose to port your existing numbers to Microsoft. Porting numbers, especially those that are associated to ISDN circuits you may have, where you can't port individual numbers from a range, really should be considered a cut over a big bang telephony move to Teams. So no phased migration, no integration with your existing telco or legacy phone system are available with calling plans. So what is direct routing? So direct routing with a supported SBC enables you to bring your own telco to Teams, to maintain your own phone numbers and ranges, and to integrate with your legacy phone system or other third-party voice applications for the purposes of migration, or actually you might want to establish a longer-term hybrid between Teams and other telephony systems you might have. Or maybe use this as an opportunity to move telcos, so perhaps you can get more competitive calling rates from somewhere else. So instead of assigning a calling plan to users, they instead have an on-premise phone number, so one of your own DDIs, and a voice routing policy assigned to them. So when a user makes an outbound call, the Teams service routes the call via the SBC or SBCs if you have multiple, according to the voice routes that you've configured. So why use direct routing? The key reason is it offers you the flexibility you simply don't have with calling plans. In terms of flexibility, it gives you a choice of who the telco is, the type of SBC used, a lot more choices with integration for services that have to stay behind, and you can choose how you want to deliver those telephony services to your users. So you can consume your existing telco services, be that ISDN, SIP, analog even, or perhaps you've got a GSM gateway you want to use with Teams. All plus more are possible with direct routing. You might have calls routed via different telco services to achieve least cost routing and high availability. You can mix and match it. It stays the same. You have the same flexibility as you would with an on-prem system. So direct routing is available in 181 countries. Actually, you can use it anywhere where you have internet connectivity, but Microsoft optimized their network for direct routing in those 181 countries, including Ireland. If you have an SBC in your office or in a data center or anywhere that is well connected to the users, it makes total sense to keep the media payload of an audio call within your network and not to have that call trombone via the cloud. So this is what we call media bypass. So media bypass isn't specific to Teams. It's a standard used across enterprise telephony platforms. So the goal of media bypass is to eliminate an unnecessary loop if the SBC and the Teams client are in the same location or within the same well-connected corporate WAN. So the rule of thumb for internal endpoints is to allow direct connections to the SBC. So you keep the traffic on the internal network and you avoid that detour via the Microsoft 365 network. Another rule of thumb is for external endpoints to block direct connections to force traffic over the Microsoft 365 Connect network, because if you've got a user working outside of the corporate LAN, the chances are that they're going to be able to connect to the Microsoft 365 network much more effectively than to have that user connect back into your customer, into your corporate LAN. So Microsoft don't have a certification program for telcos or partners that offer direct routing. What they do is they certify SBCs from certain vendors that can be used for direct routing. The main ones being AudioCodes and Ribbon, plus some others you see on this slide. That list is published online, and there's new SBC vendors being added all of the time to that. MJ Flood Technology are a Ribbon partner, and we've deployed a huge number of Ribbon SBCs into often very complex telephony environments. So when choosing an SBC, options to consider include, is it going to be physical or virtual? Are you going to put it in private or public cloud? What interfaces do you require? The number of SIP channels and so on. One thing not many people talk about with Teams is there is no support for analog devices. So what happens to your fax machines, franking machines, lift alarms, chip and pin readers, and so on? If you move fully to calling plans, there's simply no support for analog devices. Whereas with an SBC and direct routing, we can still facilitate these by sending calls to smaller devices on your network called ATAs, analog terminal adapters. Your analog devices connect to these ATAs. The ATA then talks back to the SBC. Moving on to integration, I'm going to use the recent Teams Voice project we delivered for Fingal County Council as an example of the integration you can achieve with direct routing. So Fingal had an aging Alcatel-Lucent PBX providing telephony services to around 1,600 users across their main and dozen or so branch sites. They had a mix of ISDN and SIP connectivity to the PSTN. So we replaced the legacy voice gateways with Ribbon SBCs. In this deployment, physical appliances, we had to go physical to support both ISDN and SIP. So the legacy voice gateways were removed and the existing ISDN and SIP services were connected to the SBC. As the SBCs were upstream to the Alcatel PBX and the SBC was also connected to Teams at an SBC level, we were in control of whether to route those calls to Alcatel or Teams. We can route calls at the SBC level either statically, or we can implement direct kind of dynamic lookups against Active Directory. We also worked with the maintainer of that legacy Alcatel PBX to ensure that users on the Alcatel system could continue to dial extensions that are probably memorized for a lot of years. Using 4 digits, and that would route to Teams, and vice versa. Those users in Teams could continue to call both users migrated to Teams and their colleagues in Alcatel by, again, using 4-digit extensions. All of this enabled Fingal to undertake a phased migration of users from the legacy PBX to Teams. So that was down to even on a per user basis, a department, or whatever. We always prefer a phased migration where possible. So rather than telling everyone when they come into work on a Monday, they now need to use Teams, we want to be able to drip feed people onto the system one at a time, departments, however the approach, but phased. So the phased migration helped Fingal logistically, as they had multiple sites and a large number of users, and they were also working from home during the pandemic. Alongside the Teams deployment, we also delivered Enghouse EICC. That's a Teams certified multi-channel contact center, and that's used by Fingal's customer contact unit, which is around 50 or so permanent staff. So alongside the Teams certified contact center solution, we also deployed a voice recording solution and an advanced UC analytics platform. So now if we look at deployment options, the idea of direct routing is you deploy an SBC inside your environment. It's self-hosted. When I say that, it's not necessarily true. You can take direct routing from hosted providers who now term themselves direct routing as a service provider. Or you can host the SBCs in Azure or another cloud service, or a provider might host and manage a dedicated SBC for you. But note that direct routing as a service is unlikely to offer you the integration flexibility as you'd get by hosting your own SBCs, as you're effectively consuming PSTN and Teams Voice as a multi-tenant user on the actual provider's SBC. Multiple deployment methods available, but the 2 key models we see customers implementing are on-premise and Azure hosted. You could put the SBC in AWS and another cloud, but there are major benefits in media optimization simply because that SBC is in Azure. It's very well connected to the Microsoft global network, including where the Teams backend infrastructure is hosted. For high availability and load distribution, multiple SBCs can be grouped together into a single voice route, or you could have multiple SBCs combined in a cluster. Voice backup routes have priorities assigned, and a route is only used if no SBC in higher priority order is available. You can also use voice routing policies for disaster recovery. For example, if you lost all your SBCs in Ireland, you could allow users or a subset of users to place calls to Ireland via another location you might have. For example, if you had SBCs in the UK or the SBC or the US, you could leverage those SBCs for direct routing. Another common question is what happens if you're an SBC deployed in a branch site without resilient internet connectivity? What happens if the internet goes down? The options here is you could deploy an SPA, that's a survivable branch appliance, where limited Teams functionality is available to your users in the event of an internet outage. So basically they maintain dial tone. SPA is something fairly new to Teams, but it's been around in Skype for Business for many years. Lastly, we'll briefly discuss the approach to a Teams Voice implementation. So as Gareth mentioned earlier, it's very important to profile your users' telephony needs. You do this in the gather phase. There's a pilot phase. There's 2 elements to the pilot phase. One is the technical element, checking everything technically is okay. Is the carrier working with delivering the trunk correctly? Can you transfer calls around the network? Can you support users in the way you need to? Then the second part of it is making sure when you've got telephony enabled for users, does it operate the way you want it to? Are the devices in the meeting rooms compatible? Do they work correctly? So there's 2 sides to piloting: the technical aspect of making sure everything is okay technically, then the softer element of what's the user experience, what's the actual process for migrating devices or giving users the Teams Voice, depending on your scenarios. Then migration is when you're actually hitting the ground, reconfiguring meeting room phones or devices, or giving users headsets, all of that type of stuff you need to do in the migration phase. Then lastly, review. So review is, you shouldn't just walk away after you've done a Teams voice migration, because Teams is doing, like other cloud services, is doing all of this stuff over the internet, regardless of whether that's breaking out on an SVC in your environment, or calling plans on the Microsoft side, or someone's hosting that SVC for you. Regardless, you need to make sure the experience is as you expect it to be for the users. So is the network quality good enough? Is it sustaining the level of experience you need? Are people using the service as much as they should? Or actually, what we often find are people using it more than they were before, because simply Teams is now their voices in. It's so much more convenient for them to do so now. So there's this cycle that when the project is finished, you're trying to stay on top of any issues or anything developing that might affect user quality further down the line. I'll finish with one last takeaway, is that don't fall victim to calling plans. Yes, they have their use cases, often limited use cases, but do explore direct routing. Thank you very much for your time.
Steve, thanks a million for that. Again, a lot of ground covered in a very short space of time. But look, you're available to engage with clients on wider conversations around all of the topics. Interesting there, you know, touching on Fingal County Council, and we've got a recently published case study in terms of that with Microsoft around Fingal and their actual approach and how successful it was. So I'll ask our marketing team to actually share that with everybody that's on the call this morning. So look, moving along swiftly, I'd like to welcome Jared Hewitt to the call this morning. And Jared, as we said, is going to cover off on Teams devices, rooms, all of those sorts of things, and the amount of choice that's within that area. So Jared, you're very welcome to the call, and I'll hand over to you.
That's great. Thanks, James. Can everyone see my slides there just before I start?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Grand. So yeah, just thanks for the coverage there, Steve. So with Teams, there's different devices you can use to make a call, be it your soft phone with your headset and your USB speaker devices, also regular phones, and also there's a new category of Microsoft Teams displays. With the regular phones, you can use a standard phone from up to 8 manufacturers, Poly, Crashon, Yealink, and Audio Codes. These phones can look like a traditional phone with just a simple LED display, right up to a fully featured touch phone with the full Teams UI, so you can see status of your clients. You can use Cortana. If you have some very large deployments, you may want to use a low-cost phone. These phones, like in the top right-hand corner of the slide here, can be just a standard phone from Audio Codes. The Microsoft Teams display is a new device coming out, which is for like a persistent display that would sit beside your general setup on your desk and give you access to your Teams. So you can call your colleagues, you can make phone calls, or you can use it as a speakerphone on a desk. This is a new device that's come out due to COVID, with people finding new ways to work and new ways to stay connected with their remote teams in their disparate offices. Also, a new feature of Microsoft Teams is Microsoft Teams Rooms. So Microsoft Teams Rooms is traditionally, with the AV companies, you'd have to fit out a full room, you'd put in a control system, and you'd call into a video conferencing platform. With Teams, you can now integrate that fully into your room. I'll show you here now how you can transform your meeting with Teams, how you can make any space a meeting, how easy it is to deploy, and how you can connect with hardware and software. And I also have some photos of existing installs that we've done with the team here in Dublin. So we can transform our team meeting rooms with Teams by giving a Teams feature set, so that these products have been designed by Microsoft. It's a single touchscreen in the center of the table. Depending on room size, you change your camera, microphone, and speaker, but every interface is the same depending on no matter what manufacturer you go with. So it gives you one touch join. You can make a phone call from the device. You can share your screen with remote participants, and it gives you center of the room control. There's no more going to the wall to make your calls. And you can make any space a meeting room. So for a small huddle space, you use a different camera to your big boardroom or even your auditorium, and the system scales depending on your requirements. We can also integrate with existing environments, and we've done that on a number of sites in town where customers have already made a large investment in a large display, high-end microphone and speaker systems, but they want the simplicity of use of the Microsoft Teams Room device, and we'd love to talk to you about that. They're easy to deploy. This is what really has brought it into the IT providers foray, in that it's a Windows 10 device. You sit on the network, you give it a login, you give it a license, and then you can start making your calls. There's a very low training effort. most of the systems don't require training at all. You walk in, you press start to join a call, you press you sync with your calendar. If you set a meeting, you walk into the room, it's ready to go. The center room touch controller, that's a key feature of the Teams room, is that you don't have to, as I said, get up and use the wall. You can use the familiar Teams interface on the table to control your call, to raise the volume, to control your camera, to turn the system on and off. There's 7 manufacturers certified by Microsoft to make the Microsoft Teams rooms. These are Crestron, HP, Poly, Lenovo, Logitech, Yealink, and new to the market now is Dell. As you can see, the hardware setups are slightly, the form factor is slightly different, but the user interface is identical throughout. We have the guide here to help you decide what you need for your large room, your focus room, right up to your extra large meeting space. But again, we've done about 400 rooms this year. We've nearly seen everything at this stage. We'd love to talk to you about how we can integrate this with your existing setups. Here's some photos as well, just to show you what we've done. So from the top left-hand corner, we have a Georgian building. It's got Teams enabled. Right up to top right-hand corner, we have a 98-inch screen, Logitech tap there integrated for the guys in our new there on Granton Street. Thanks for that. I'll hand you back to James now, and if you have any questions, yeah, hit me up at the end.
Thanks, Jared. That's excellent. Look, Jared, it can't be understated how simplified now rooms are to be able to be brought into the into the solution. I mean, from memory, AV, we were hostage to fortune in some cases. Any sort of view on that statement?
Yeah, no, that's weird, and that's my background as well. My background has been doing AV systems, and I'll bring up the photos again to show you some of these rooms. It was the domain of the AV integrator where you would put maybe 1 or 2 VC meet rooms into a building. Now we're seeing clients, especially coming back to work after COVID, enabling every room to be a Teams room. It used to be like for a standard system, 15, 20 grand of audiovisual equipment, Cisco or Polycom to make it work. Now you can get on board with a huddle space for 4 or 5K, right up to a large boardroom. You're probably not even spending more than 10. And then that's why we're going. The other feature you see is all the rooms we've done here, there's generally one device on the table. In the past, you'd put in an expensive video conferencing system, but you might have a phone beside it, a conference phone, and that was the busiest device in the room. Now it's all driven through Teams.
Yeah. So yeah, look, it's excellent, and thanks for giving us the overview of that, Jared. So look, guys, operating nicely to time, so we're delighted with that, and I would like to thank all of our contributors this morning. It's not easy to deliver it in such a short space of time. It's a very wide and varying topic, the whole area of Teams. So well done to everybody on the call. Thank you to everybody who has joined our call this morning as well and given us the time. In terms of, and I listen to advertisements and that around providers and providing Teams. Be under no illusion, the best experience in the country and proven experience is sitting here with you on this call this morning. So if you are approaching Teams, as part of your digital transformation, at the very least, speak to us. You'll gain that experience and probably avoid a lot of the pitfalls that maybe some companies experience. So once again, thank you all for joining this morning, and look forward to chatting to you in the future. Thank you and good morning, everybody.